everyone a minute to be seated. Thank you all for coming. I'm Merritt Matheson. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Stewart. We have a lot of dignitaries and elected officials here. For those that don't know, I can't see most of you, so I'm not going to do my best to call everyone out, but I do welcome all of you. I'd like to thank the Army Corps and Colonel Kelly throughout this entire process. They've been extremely transparent and open, and them being here today after the announcement of Plan CC goes to show that even further, this entire listening tour. I want to thank them again for continuing to keep the ball rolling and to stay on track and on the timely schedule that they've been given by Congress. So, you know, this is going to be an informal meeting where what we're doing is we're hoping to get those that have been involved in this process, everyone in this room knows why they're here, knows what's going on, to have a brief, open dialogue with Colonel Kelly and his team on ways to optimize and improve Plan CC for the benefit of all. You know, that's what we're hoping to gather here today. I'm going to let Colonel Kelly say a few words, but for those that would like to speak, we'll ask you to come up to the podium, state your name, state who you are. Please raise your hand, and we can have someone else who's on deck to speak stand behind the podium and wait respectfully in line. We're not going to have time limits, but please be cognizant of the time and know that the room is full of people that have valuable input to share as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Colonel.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you. So I appreciate it. So this is great. I absolutely love kind of the interactive, not quite so formal methodology. Just came from Palm Beach. You know, it was really formal with the commissioners there, but really look forward to kind of a dialogue. So I'm not gonna bore you with PowerPoints, you know, or any of that kind of stuff. But just kind of want to talk through where we are, right? Where we are and where we're going. So for a couple of years, we have been working on this thing we call LOSOM, right? The new schedule for Lake Okeechobee. And that is trying to get mirrored up with the completion of Herbert Hoover Dike. So years ago, we identified some conditions as we did, you know, kind of looking across the country with dam safety. And Herbert Hoover Dike had some critical risk to it. Built early on, you know, construction methods when, you know, it got built was you take the material, you pile it up, and there's your 143-mile dam. Not that simple, but certainly, you know, the construction methodologies have changed, so we put in $2 billion. State of Florida kicked in a lot, and we've been trying to get that to a good risk place. And we're confident that the construction that's going to be completed at the end of 2022 is going to reduce the risk of any kind of dike issues or dam issues with Lake Okeechobee. And so what that also does is that gets us back into an opportunity where the lake can potentially hold more water. The risk of storms and things like that is reduced. And so it fundamentally has an opportunity to change the way we manage the lake. And so we're seizing on that opportunity and have spent a lot of time doing it. Typically those things we plan them for about 18 months. Instead, we're going to crank through this in about 3 years, right? So we kind of doubled the timeline for this because we know how critically important it is. And we anticipate that this interim schedule is going to last probably Probably about 10 years. That's best guess, right? So it depends on how quickly we can get the EAA reservoir constructed. South Florida Water Management District is moving out. They're building STAs, and that's awesome. We're going to be able to get our first construction contract for the EAA reservoir portion started this year. So there is momentum, but another multi-billion-dollar project in South Florida. We gotta get the resources and get after it, right? And we've got to get the construction done. So we're moving out. I think momentum in terms of that is pretty high. So kind of back to the LACO schedule, right? So we spent a couple of years talking with everybody and figuring out all the desires and needs and wants for a new lake schedule. You know, what's bad about the lower schedule? What things should we focus on to improve? And spent a couple years doing that. Hundreds of thousands of model runs trying to get us to figure out what right looks like. And just a week and a half ago came out with Plan Charlie Charlie. And Charlie Charlie as a plan, as a balanced array, does not necessarily win at too much of anything, but it's pretty good across the board. And one of the things I say is, of our 11 kind of metrics that we chose between, that the team, the project delivery team, which is groups including stakeholders and consultants for towns and cities and all kinds of folks, developed the metrics by which we would compare the plans. And so those teams developed those metrics with us, and then we compared the plans. And so for the 11 metrics that we did a comparison of, Plan Charlie Charlie was in the top 3 of 10 out of the 11. And so that truly represents, from our perspective, the best picture of balance. And so that's the framework, right? So that plan is the framework for what we think the schedule is going to look like going forward. And so we're into the next step of optimization. Like I said, we've done hundreds of thousands of model runs, working through it. I think we can make Charlie Charlie better. I think we've got a good framework. I think it's a great philosophy of how Lake Okeechobee water gets utilized in the state of Florida, not only as a resource, but how it affects releases to the estuaries and water to the south and all of that. And so I think it's a great start point. The optimization is not throw out everything we've done. We know what we want to do. We've got a baseline. And so what else could we eke out of it? And we've seen, we've had, inputs from a lot of different stakeholders as they've done through the data, as they've done their own kind of modeling that are pointing out things that maybe we could tweak a little here or there and get an even better plan out of it. So that's what we're going to do. And the timeline for that, so August timeline, the first week of August, I anticipate kind of formally announcing the choice of CC. And then I plan on giving guidance to the team that says, okay, let's look at these 4, 5, 6 focus areas where we're really going to hone in on and try to make CC even better. At the same time, we're going to start applying the logic, right? So up until now, we've done a comparison of performance over an average, a period of record. So years and years long, if we were to institute this plan, how much water supply, improvement would we see? How much of a reduction to the St. Lucie estuary in terms of releases would we see, right? So those are some of those examples of how we did the comparison. But what we haven't done yet is really applied the logic, right? And that is the release guidance and the water manager's guidance that says on a Tuesday in March, right, when the weather looks like this and the lake is at this stage, right, what are you going to do? And so there's nouns and verbs in the document that are highly important, a decision kind of diagram that outlines what what the decisions are going forward. And so not only the modeling and the performance over the kind of statistical average gets married up with the physical guidance, the words that help direct Jason's team of water managers and the colonel to make those kind of day-to-day decisions based on what's going around them. And so that will happen in the August to September, October timeframe, right? And so as that gets put into place, then we kind of start the NEPA process. So the environmental impact statement, working with the agencies like the Fish and Wildlife Service, we'll get our biological opinion, we'll do all of that coordination to develop the actual manual and release the draft EIS. So the environmental impact statement will go back out to the public in about February 2022. That's the plan. And then there's another round of public comment and making sure we're doing all the right things. And then that results in a decision in about Thanksgiving timeframe in 2022. And so that's where we're going. We anticipate keeping the stakeholders and the participants in the PDT and the public informed and transparent as possible as we continue to go forth, because not only is the performance important, but the language that's in the manual to drive those decisions is also critically important. So we've got to make sure that we're still completely tied in and communicate and work through all of that together. And so that's really what's kind of happening. I know there's probably a ton of questions, and I'll just stop right there, and my team and I will try to handle any questions you got about what we're doing, what we're seeing, or where we're going.
Good to see you again.
Hey, sir.
Colonel, I brought back number one to a very similar table setup we had a number of years ago with your predecessor. And I would just say it in this way: you have been so present in our community and around the community throughout this process. I can tell you it's greatly appreciated. We've seen your face a lot more than we've seen other faces in the past, and that doesn't go unnoticed. I appreciate your remarks both this morning and just now, and I want to focus my brief remarks on three words that you mentioned in yours. You mentioned the term desire, the term needs, and the term logic. And as we break down those three words, I would just ask that you truly do keep those in mind. Number one, the difference between desires and needs. Before we start fulfilling the desires of stakeholders around this lake, the benefits of stakeholders around this lake, we need to hit the point of doing no harm to those that don't have desires. That's this community. This community doesn't have designs on something coming out of the lake in order to make things better here. Everything that we reduce is only that. It's a reduction in harm. It's not a benefit. And that is the need for this community. We don't have desires. We just need to not be harmed here. And I think as you use the term logic as well, I think logic really dictates that we start at that point before we start doling out any benefits. That is truly logical, to not harm anybody before we start providing benefits to others. And I know you've heard that from me many times. I appreciate you listening to it many times, and I truly appreciate you reflecting on those comments, which I believe that you are and you have been. And in that, I will leave the floor to the next person in line. Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it.
Am I calling? Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Harder. I'm president of a fly rod club here. I'm on the board with a Stewart Rod Reel Club. I'm on the board of directors with the River Keeper. And I'm probably the only one in this room or anyone around that spends every day on the water. I live on the water, South Fork of the St. Lucie River. I'm out there every day and I've seen the damage that has happened. Just remember, when you make a decision, remember what the decisions did in past years. Treasure Coast community alone, we've had $575 million lost in economic damage to the community. Fish-wise, we've lost 1.75 billion fish in the Treasure Coast. Statewide, we've lost 6 billion fish due to the loss of seagrass. And over 7 trillion invertebrates. These are the shrimp, the crabs, stuff like that. This is what we've lost, and I don't know if we're ever going to get it back. But this is what the decisions in the past have caused us, the harm it's caused to South Florida, between the St. Lucie River, the Indian River, the Caloosahatchee, out to Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Florida Bay. This is the damage that's been done by our past decisions. So keep that in mind when you make your future decisions. Thank you.
Oops, sorry about that. Sorry, Mayor. Hey, Colonel, how are you? Glad to see you. Hey, I want to thank you all very much the last, oh man, it's been more than a year. All the core calls and all the lows, all the meetings, I was on every single one of them. I think y'all handled it very well. I know you're taking some heat from others, stakeholders. You probably took some heat today down in Palm Beach County. I like to offer Palm Beach County every drop of our discharges for water supply so they never have a shortage again. I'd love to have a way to do that, really. I'm going to talk about CC briefly, give others a chance to speak. I like the plan. When the first plans came out, I really had doubts that we would end up with CC, so I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy about the gains we get from CC. We're cutting our harm by an estimated 75% at this point, as I understand it. We can live with that. We've had nothing but harm for the last 80 years in Stewart from these discharges. The one thing that worries me about optimization is we're going to have to give back some benefit. And I'll speak personally for Indian River Keeper, organization I direct, and a lot of residents here. I don't think should we expect to give back any of the benefit we're going to get out of this plan. I'm hoping that the water that you're trying to cut from the Caloosahatchee side, I'm hoping every drop of that water be sent south sooner than later. And I know there's infrastructure that has to come online, but I would be very disappointed to find out in 1 year that we're only going to see a 50% discharge reduction here. I don't think it goes far enough, just being very frank with you. I hope you'll keep us in mind here. And Stuart, we've been waiting a long time for this.
Yes, sir.
All right, and thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hurd. I'm a Martin County Commissioner. Thank you very much for being here. In no place else in the world is the fecundity of the estuary here duplicated. It's the most biodiverse estuary in North America, critical nursery grounds for thousands of species up and down the eastern seaboard, including dozens of threatened and endangered species. It's a remarkably resilient estuary, a very robust one, despite the tons of poison that we've dumped into it over the last 9 decades. I have been a staunch supporter of the Army Corps of Engineers. That's evidence-based. I've watched in the last 15 years as the Army Corps has done a remarkable job of trying to improve the ecosystem in South Florida. However, this plan abandons recovery, abandons restoration. It looks to me like it's just a slower death. The estuary is collapsing. That's not hyperbole. It's not fear-mongering. That's just a statement of fact. And we are the only stakeholders who receive no benefit. All we receive is harm. Please, as you tweak, as you optimize, consider that this critical estuary doesn't want any discharges. So please eliminate all discharges to the St. Lucie River.
Hi, I'm Eve Samples, Executive Director at Friends of the Everglades. We were founded by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 1969, and real quick, I came across a quote from her the other day about the Army Corps of Engineers, and she said, "When you see Florida from above and you see a straight line with water in it, that means the Army Corps has been there." And I bring that up because I want to congratulate you on restoring some of the oxbows to the Kissimmee and what you're about to celebrate later this week. So we still have some straight lines we need to take care of, and the C-44 Canal and the C-43 are 2 of them, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So we at Friends of the Everglades think that the Army Corps has made a lot of progress when we look back at LORS 08 and where we are with LOSOM. Obviously, with LORS 08, after Hurricane Katrina, the integrity of the Herbert Hoover Dike was first and foremost, and you did a great job protecting public health when it came to flood risk in LORS 08. But what didn't happen in LORS 08 was a reasonable analysis of the risk posed by harmful algal blooms. And if you look back at the NEPA analysis document, that was stated flat out. So let's fix that now, and I see the Army Corps acknowledging that shortcoming. You have a harmful algal bloom risk metric. We think that's not entirely accurate and only sees part of the picture. So we ask that as you move into the next iteration, you take a look at that. More specifically, in terms of optimizing Plan CC, we ask that you send water south through all of the operational lake zones down to the water shortage management band. And if the South Florida Water Management District says you can't do that, I encourage you to ask them why that can't be done and why taxpayer-funded STAs south of the lake are used largely for EAA runoff and not for Lake Okeechobee capacity. I think we should be looking closely at consumptive use permits and how we can examine those and possible earlier in the season water cutbacks so that we can get the lake lower so that we're at a better starting point at the start of the rainy season. So that's another way to potentially optimize CC. We like what CC does in terms of sending water south down to the lower East Coast. When we talk about water supply, we tend to default to the EAA, but of course there's a really important element of sending water south to the Everglades and Florida Bay because it also replenishes the aquifer to the south. So that's fantastic. We like what we see there. And we also acknowledge that you might have a slightly different situation with the Seminole tribe and that because of the compact that they're part of, they might deserve a little bit more. And you don't have to give the EAA farmers as much as you give them. Maybe the Seminoles deserve a little bit more. We've spent most of our time in this LOSOM process talking about Part D of the regulation schedule, what flows east and west, and we would just ask that you really give some serious consideration to Part C, looking at how we can send more flows south. And I already acknowledged that the Water Management District has to be a serious partner in that. And if this all boils down to us needing more STA capacity, and if we can't get it from the existing STAs, then let's talk about what we need in terms of more STAs. And as some of us pointed out in our scoping comments for LOSOM, the Army Corps of Engineers does have eminent domain power, so that's a tool you have. So please start with the priority of protecting public health, protect us from the harmful algal blooms that we know present a clear risk to the community. Work as hard to protect us from harmful algal bloom risks as you did in LORS 08 to protect the Herbert Hoover Dike and that risk of breach. So thank you for your time. You really have been accessible, and we'll be submitting our comments in writing too.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to pull the string just a little bit about the algal bloom metric, right? So, you know, absolutely, admittedly, it's not a great metric, I mean, but it is a metric. And as you pointed out, when I came on board at the end of 18, algae was not in the decision criteria because of the environmental impact statement, right? And so it wasn't really part of that. We have tried very diligently to make sure it is part of the decision criteria going forward. And the way we do that is we have a metric. We briefed the Blue-Green Algae Task Force. We went to our Center of Expertise, our lab, and that does that sort of thing, and we got about as far as we could go. But important to understand that is, oversimplified, and for lack of a better term, it's a placeholder, right? It's there. We've got to be smart in the way we document it, so that any increases in knowledge and science about algae can be quickly and adaptively put into the LOSOM plan to make us better, right? We're hopeful that we have better, that we could learn and maybe get some predictive analysis. That would be awesome, because that would really help in terms of making decisions going forward. And then also the ability to mitigate and continue to develop, over the great work that South Florida and Florida DEP have done in terms of some of their innovative technologies and mitigation and stuff like that. So completely understood. It was very, very important and critical that we got something algae in the plan. And although not as detailed or as developed as we'd like, we certainly are going to look at how we can continue to make that a better tool in decision making go forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for the give and take. If I might just add a comment on that, and
yeah.
this is a really valuable forum right now. We appreciate it.
Sure.
So one of our concerns in terms of how you were using HAB risk in the evaluation of the alternatives was how it completely ignored anything before June or after August. And we just know, we've seen it here on the Treasure Coast, we've seen it on the West Coast, that harmful algal blooms can move from the lake into the estuaries during those months, outside of those months, I should say. And then I think you were referring to the chlorophyll A indicator.
Yep.
We recognize that has shortcomings. We also recognize you got limited tools there. But if there's something you can do now, it's look outside of those limited months as you're optimizing and choosing an optimized plan.
Sure, and a lot of that goes into logic. I mean, we've heard very clearly that number one, it's a part of the decision, right? It's been a part of the decision that I've been making all along since I've been here. It's going to be formalized in LOSOM for certain, and that's a piece of the logic that we absolutely have to get right. And so that is adjusted, in terms of timings of releases for certain, and it'll be in the plan. It'll be part of the criteria for decision, and I think that a lot of that will land on the logic side and the nouns and verbs that we work through as the science comes online, and we can actually get better predictive and other ways to tackle the issue. But
Yeah.
we're
So-
all in. Yes, ma'am.
May I translate?
Yeah, please translate.
May I have that?
Yes.
Because I think Eve is saying one thing and
And
you're
I'm saying
saying another, and I would like
be
to
the first
play
time.
translator.
Okay.
Because I think we want to get together, but we're just not quite there yet. And I think if I could just point to something, it might help. Okay. Ben, does this have a pointer thingy? I can't.
Is it on the side?
I got it. Okay. Okay. So Eve is talking about this. She's talking about the performance, because in model world, when we put it in the model and we get output, we put it through a bunch of stuff and you get numbers, right? And so we evaluate it and we got scores, and we were able to use some of our metrics through our analysis that said, if I send water out of the lake in the summer months when we think we're more likely, then we can transfer algal bloom mass to the estuaries, and so we turn that into a risk, because that's the best we have. Knowing that we really need a better tool, and the congressman's trying to help us get funding for that, and we're working with our research center to do that. We know we need all that, okay. What the commander is talking about is here. He's saying, we know we need better, and so allow us the opportunity to evaluate it in the numbers, and then in 7, at the same time, write it in such a way that to cover what you're talking about, whenever there's algae on the lake, allow us the flexibility to hold water back when we can, so that we can bridge the gap while the technology catches up. That's what you're saying to each other.
That's a good translation.
I think we're there now. Thank you, and really appreciate you being here today and being present in the community, as the congressman said.
Thanks, man.
Yep. Good afternoon, Colonel.
Hey, sir.
Team, Mark
Poor
Perry.
Jackie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's been trying to get up there.
All right. I'll be brief, but, we've all been in this quite a long time. And those of us remember, Run 25, WSC, Lourdes 2008. And now here we are with LOSOM. This is an opportunity. This is the time to right the wrongs that have been done to so many northern estuaries and other ecosystems in our state. I mean, we've engineered this thing, we've developed this flood control plan, quote unquote, and now it has all these other purposes for water supply, demands here, stakeholders here and there, and we're all saying, look, we gotta get this right, and now's the opportunity to do it. We all look at this modeling effort that's for the 52-year period of record, and we say, we don't want existing conditions baseline of 2019. We don't want, the no action condition for 2025. We want action, we want something to do. And you've chosen to look at CC and say, here's a balanced plan to start with,
And now we need to optimize it or take it into account and into effect. You know, we were all there in the announcement in January of 19, and then in August at the first PDT meeting that year in Clewiston. And so there's no need to say, well, this hasn't been going on for a while and we need more time to decide it. You all are on track. You all are on this course to make this happen by 2022 so that we can have a plan, a new plan. And that new plan really needs to follow the framework you started out with in July, follow it through to the new guidance that you put out recently in the PDT meeting that says we want 0 discharges over to the St. Lucie estuary. They don't want any discharges. We want to stop the harmful discharges to the Caloosahatchee. They need to keep in that zone D the 2100 cap that they're talking about. They don't need that flexibility over there to do more than that, what they're being charged with. And we need to optimize and put all this water south the best we can. When we look at that modeling over that period of record, we say, well, you know, this is what it says we can't put. There's too many constraints to put this water south. Well, if those constraints are not your concern, but they're the state concern, and the state needs to do something about it. You know, when we look at LORS 2008, this is a water control plan for Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades agricultural area. This is supposed to be a water control plan that affects that water control in the South Basin, south of the lake. We've allowed over 1.6 million acre feet to go south into the STAs and in the water conservation areas during wet season, and fills up the capacity for only 160,000 acre feet from the lake. That is ludicrous. We need to allow that basin runoff to be stored and treated in that basin and not run off and use the STAs and the capacity south of the lake into the Everglades that needs to be used by the lake. If we can work that out and work that into this optimization, you'll have plenty of capacity to put this water south where it needs to be, when it needs to be, and in the quality, quantity, timing, distribution it needs to be, so that it doesn't harm these coastal estuaries. The state and even federal efforts have gone through years of this Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Plans and all of this criteria. Many of us have participated for hours and thousands of hours on trying to get these plans in place and implement a plan that'll protect these northern estuaries. As you've heard and I've seen and personally documented and scientifically trying to restore some of these habitats that are critical to these estuaries. This oyster reefs right out here, the seagrass beds that are critical in the outer estuary, and all the North and South Fork tributaries. These are critical habitats for over 4,300 species of plants and animals within this confines of this area. So please really listen to the stakeholders here, particularly on this coast that says we want 0 discharges from lake, 0 allowable lake releases from Lake Okeechobee to the St. Lucie estuary.
Hello, I'm Jackie Thurlow Lippish. Grew up here in Martin County, and presently I'm serving on the South Florida Water Management District. And just so you know what a small town you're in, I have known Mark Perry since I was 2 years old. And in case you don't know, also, just out of interest, the 4 of you are sitting in the epicenter of the Riverlution that started here during the last summer of 2013 that has completely changed water policy, not only here, but throughout all of the state of Florida. I am very proud to be from Martin County. I think something really special is happening for all of us at this time, and part of this special thing is you, Colonel Kelly. I'm serious. And I remember the first day at the Everglades Coalition that I had a chance to speak to you. I don't think I even said so much as hello or congratulations, but I looked at you and I said, sir, you have to do something about the algae. And you have, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for taking into consideration that for the lake schedule coming up. You know what the people here want. They want 0 discharges. I think if there's ever been a person to try to deliver that fairly and equitably across the state, as the mission of the South Florida Water Management District has put forth. It is your team and you. And I thank you very much for that. And I just want to say one last thing, because I think it's so funny, kind of. So last week, I called up Sean Cooley, who's our communication director for the South Florida Water Management District, and I said, Mr. Cooley, it is just unbelievable, this NEPA process that the Corps is doing. I mean, all the discussion and how they've been doing this for 2 years, and I mean, this NEPA process, it's just unreal. And there's a quiet, and he goes, Ms. Thurlow Lippisch, they haven't even started the NEPA process. And I said, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This open, transparent, long conversation for the whole state. You will be remembered for this. Thank you very, very much.
Hi, Colonel. I'm Blair Wickstrom, publisher of Florida Sportsman Magazine. We're the largest fishing and outdoor magazine in the state of Florida. In the 70s and 80s, we advocated a lot for fishery management change. We advocated for game fish status for redfish, and we helped lead the effort to ban gill nets in the state of Florida through a constitutional change. It was a lot to better the recreational fishing industry and our environment and way of life in the state of Florida. We're in our 52nd year. We no longer have to battle the fishery issues that we had to in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now it's an issue of fishable waters. We have issues all over the state right now, as you know, in terms of flare-ups of seagrass die-off and sewage spills and just, it's almost whack-a-mole as we go around the state. But the single largest issue affecting the most people in the state of Florida is how we've managed the water from Lake Okeechobee south. What we have is this discussion about optimization. Nobody's talked about optimizing our industry, a $10 billion industry in the state. But we keep getting back to zero issues in terms of another industry, much smaller, the sugar industry, that gets all optimization all the time. They've never not gotten the water they've wanted. They've never not got the drainage that they've requested or needed. I think we have a priority problem in the state of Florida. And if we're looking at industries, aside from health, well-being, our estuaries, our critters, why are we looking to optimize the sort of the water supply of an industry that doesn't do a lot for our state? They're federally supported. It forces us to keep the lake at an unusually high level. If we didn't have to irrigate 400,000 acres of sugarcane, we wouldn't have the lake at levels that we need, and we're having to do all of this backbending around and thousands of miles of canals and pumps the size that mankind has never seen before to support this industry. So what I'm saying is we can move more water south. It's a matter of prioritization. Get more water from the lake into STAs 3 and 4 early on. As was stated earlier, there's a way disproportionate amount of water being held in the lake, so the EAA always has that drainage capacity. We get to November, we have all this water in the system, we can't send it from the lake into the STAs because they're offline. Well, of course, we knew what was coming. Why are they offline? I mean, we knew that potentially this was going to be a problem. The lake was full, and so my only question again is the prioritized industry that gets all the optimization is sugar. But we have another industry in Florida, aside from all these other issues, we're in big trouble because of what's going on in Tampa Bay right now in terms of the red tide, the massive red tide that had issues that, you know, are a whole nother set of circumstances. But again, it affects our industry. Nobody's looking to optimize our industry, our way of life here in Stuart, Florida. We moved up here from Miami a little over 22 years ago. And we were fighting for this issue before that. We fought sugarcane burning in 1971, so it's not new because we've moved here. But it's incredible that we continue to fight this. And like the congressman said, let's address how we're going to damage an industry before we optimize somebody else in terms of making sure their profits are never going to be any higher. You know, we're guaranteeing them maximum profits before we get the even nod of that safety. And so that's what I would like you to hopefully further consider as you move through CC and how we look to potentially change things. If anything, hopefully it's more water from the lake into those STAs early in the process, guaranteeing that they're going to be online, working with them as you always, predictably do as partners in moving this much water to make sure that that capacity for that drainage is there and move more water south. So, thank you.
Colonel Charles Grandy. I'm a past St. Lucie County Commissioner and a proud member of the Rivers Coalition. Blair said pretty much everything in a lot of words. I would just say twice in the last 10 days I've heard you talk about optimization, and both times you used water supply as the example for optimization. To us, optimizing water supply sounds like finding ways to keep more water in the lake on a just-in-case basis for the agricultural interests. And I would hope that you would keep in mind that every time we think of keeping more water in the lake for any reason, that means there's a really, really good chance as we go into the wet season that water, which could have been released to the south early, is going to have to be released somewhere, and now there's no capacity to the south. So please, anything that can be done to move as much south as possible, as early as possible, especially during the dry season, that's how we get to zero discharges. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Thank you for the opportunity to address you again. I know you've heard quite a bit from us as PDT members over the last 3 years, and I want to open my remarks with an acknowledgement of the professionalism and expertise of your team. Every one of them has been a pleasure to work with and has demonstrated remarkable transparency, it's been said, professionalism, and just profound expertise. There are so many times where we as a team who were blessed to have some great consultants helping us process all this data over the last few years, and there was times we'd think we'd really stumbled onto something profound, and we would call up one of your folks and they'd say, yeah, we know that, we're working on it. And it just really was impressive. We think there was a few times we found some things they didn't see, but they deserve the highest praise for how they've conducted themselves and represented the Corps over the last few years. I want to make a few points for the record that we have made many times and will probably continue to make. First of which, I want to talk about the optimization process, which is the main focus of our conversation today. And just as a reminder, Plan CC came from Pareto. It was a bit of a compromise for us from the beginning with our belief that the only equitable outcome for the St. Lucie Estuary was zero discharges. So at its onset, CC had a annual average model performance of 59,000 acre-feet a year through the 308. And in the release of that, the Corps' balanced alternative guidance direction that came with that was that when working towards achieving some of the balance in CC, you would strive for no less than the performance below, and one of those bullet points is to maintain that 59,000 acre-feet a year annual average. And then on June 9th, it was modified to 72,000 acre-feet, and we would just ask that in the optimization phase, it would not be further modified to increase releases to the east. And some of the other speakers have done a remarkable and eloquent job of describing the reason why that's a profoundly important objective for us, and that's in the value of the estuary. One of the things that we've talked about some and will continue to talk about is that throughout this process, because of the needs of tying things back to stage and flow, we've used salinity as a primary indice for how this impacts the estuary. And I want to remind you as you go into optimization that it is just an indice, and that there are certainly other factors than the health of oyster, which are absolutely critical. We know that oysters are fairly resilient. If we get the flows right, that 3 to 5 years, oyster beds are probably going to be pretty healthy again. We know that seagrasses that are impacted from the total suspended solids, the freshwater lens that covers them up, and probably nutrients and other pollutants that come with the water, that they probably are more like a 15-year recovery period. And one of the factors that's probably been least considered in our view, and maybe just as important as any other, is the nearshore coral reef, that we've demonstrated that salinity levels even less than 32 start to create a harm situation, and as minimal as 1700 CFS release can have a freshwater lens over the coral reef up to 2.5 miles south, and we have no idea how long that takes to recover. In fact, it's probably likely that it would never recover without intervention. So those are some considerations, and additionally, I know this has been said many times, but the nutrient content that comes with that water makes it impossible for us to meet our TMDL and to achieve the water quality standards the EPA has set for us in the estuary. But again, thank you for coming to the City Stewart. Thank you for coming to Martin County, and for your openness throughout this whole process. We look forward to seeing it through with you.
Figured I'll fill in the gap. I'm Merritt Matheson. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Stewart. Thank you for coming again. And I want to thank you for the open and transparent process. I believe you know where the city stands. We want 0 discharges. We're not naturally connected to the lake. All discharges to us are harmful. Our top goal is to reiterate from the lowest level of government here, the same thing that Congressman Mass said: do no harm. In the beginning of this process, you sought out a lot of metrics, and this community did an excellent job of providing metrics of what harm has been done to us. Mr. Jim Harder, who's on the water every day, and I personally know that's true. I used to be on the water every day and sometimes wonder why I left that. But the stats he quoted about the millions and billions of dollars of harm this community has suffered, and all of South Florida, from National Geographic, of what happens when you lose an acre of seagrass. Again, we've done very well at documenting in quantitative data the harm that's been done. But for me, and a lot of my fellow residents, one of the frustrations is some of the other stakeholders we haven't really seen true metrics of what harm has been done over the past decade. All we see is the benefits that they've received and the harm that's done to us. And we see that, and I've encouraged to draw the lake lower, as low as you possibly can. Plan CC gets there. It's not quite there. But draw the lake lower so you have that capacity in the wet season. Because imagining that the rains aren't going to come in South Florida is like pretending you're going to hook a tarpon and it's not going to jump. The rains are going to come. The lake is going to fill up. We need that extra capacity. So when we talk about optimization, how to make Plan CC better, it's almost there. It still gives us a lot of harm. But one of the things is eliminate Zone F. You need that flexibility to draw the lake down further, to send more water south and reallocate those benefits. And we want to try and allocate those benefits properly. Reduce the harmful, high flow damaging discharges to the Caloosahatchee. But do that from modeling the water that you can send south. Don't send us more water. Because I know it's been said before, Plan CC, when it originally came out, was better for us than it is now. It was 59,000 acre feet or 60,000 acre feet. And now it has increased. We got back, City of Stewart got behind it when it was less harm. So there is room in the system. What more beneficial water can be sent to Lake Worth Lagoon? They do want water, so that's more water. If you can shift some of the strings and pull the string that way a little bit, can you get us back to that 60,000 acre feet? Can you reduce some of the harm that in this system is done to the Caloosahatchee? But when you compare the different stakeholders, please look at apples to apples. Every drop of water sent this way is harmful. Yet you can't compare that to every drop of water sent different directions. You have to subtract what those stakeholders are saying is beneficial water and compare that. Look at apples to apples when you compare and how you can benefit everyone to allocate those benefits. Look at other examples as you try to improve this model. Perhaps improvement on the C-44 canal itself can be discussed. When you have a bunch of 70-foot sport fishing boats fleeing a hurricane, the erosion that can happen of that canal and banks falling in has to be considered. What can you do to shore that up? How the S-80 discharges and the sediment that harms us. That's some of the stuff we'd like to see examined and looked at. If we must receive discharges, which again, our stance will always be, we want 0 discharges. CC is an improvement, and it models, in my mind, one of the things we've been asking for is discharges at a last possible result, a means of last resort. We can handle that for now. Discharges at a means of last resort. But how can we improve on that? How can we ensure that that's it? That we are the last chance? That the only time you're going to discharge on us is when other communities are actually getting flooded. Because all those discharges are literally flooding our estuary and killing it. So we'll keep working with you. And again, I thank you for the open, transparent conversation. Good. Someone else.
Good afternoon again. First, I want to start by thanking you all for the conversations in each and every one of the communities. It's incredibly important. And I want to thank the couple of previous speakers for acknowledging that we may not be able to stop the discharges to the St. Lucie River. The truth of the matter is, as I just said in Palm Beach, this isn't syrup. And we can only stretch LOSOM so far to solve the problems we all face. We simply don't have the infrastructure yet. We're getting there. We're making progress, which is why we're doing all of this. And I know that you guys have been working really hard to find the way to move this forward that meets all of the authorized project purposes for LOSOM, that expands upon and hopefully gives us some more flexibility in ways that are not harmful to some of those project purposes. Water supply is one of those. People may not like it, they may not want it to be one, but it is. And the city of West Palm Beach is absolutely concerned about their drinking water. It's not just all about agriculture. So when I hear my friends and neighbors here and their pain, which absolutely is warranted, and trust me, my husband works in Martin County. We're dependent upon this system too. I wish that what they understood is that the levels of pain are very real in other parts of the system. And it's not just simply as easy as send it all south or close the locks of the, it just doesn't work that way. The Caloosahatchee absolutely is concerned because they're gonna get so much more water as a result of trying not to give us any. The people that live, the tribes and the people that live down south of the lake are very concerned because year after year, they've watched us send more water south, and everything is drowning the tree islands, and the animals are dying, and their traditional uses are no longer there. Those are very real, very documented concerns. So my message is not just to you, yes, please give us relief from the discharges, give us every bit of relief you can, but also to my friends and neighbors here, that we are all suffering, and I really hope that we can work together to find that way forward. Thank you.
Hi, Jim Moyer speaking on behalf of myself and also the Marine Resources Council. I'm a board member of the Rivers Coalition as well as the River Keeper. You've heard people from the community eloquently say why we need to adjust the CC schedule and optimize it for our relief. I've witnessed our estuary deteriorate in a really dramatic and very distressing way. I don't know how many more years of this degradation it can survive. It would be tragic to see it go. It's time that we reduce the really dirty water that is full of sediments and pollution that is being discharged into our estuary on an annual basis. There is no reason not to remove Zone F. Reduce the lake levels as low as they need to be for water supply, but no lower, no higher than that. It's necessary that the South Florida Water Management District renegotiate consumptive use permits and to alleviate the ability for the EAA to fill the SDAs with their dirty water. It's preposterous that this continues to go forward, and it's your responsibility to provide that water to them. They need to move it through the SDAs as quickly and as cleanly as possible. This is up to you to negotiate. It's your responsibility to do that. And we very much appreciate the progress that's been made so far. No discharges at St. Lucie. It's not necessary, it's not good for us. It's killing us.
Has it ever been this quiet?
Any other commenters?
Yeah, so were you raising your hand?
No, I was waiting.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Are we able to ask questions at this point, or is that coming up?
This is about as informal as we can go, so if anyone has any questions,
Yes.
The only thing I'd ask, maybe,
Yep.
come on up so you can be heard.
if you want to stand up at the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a core meeting, so.
No.
PDT, public.
There's no raise your hand function?
None of that.
Yeah. And one concern, Colonel, I have is, and I'm a little confused on it, is, the discharges as a last resort scenario. Hurricane bearing down, the lake's already high, 16 plus. We're in that zone for the discharges Plan C does stipulate at this point. What about a present algal bloom? What about cyanobacteria? I also heard there's some talks to the old, the Zoom meetings that your concern is also whether you'll discharge to any estuary at times of a cyano bloom on the lake, cyanobacteria bloom. What if there's a bloom on the lake in September, which there normally is, and you have a problem? You have to discharge both estuaries. All bets are off. Is that how it's going to work with even after optimization? Is there any way to you know, because if the cyanobacteria bloom is there, it's coming our way, I understand. What in the world can we do to this plan to possibly, you know, lessen the chance of that? Or, and also, I've heard some rumor about if it's a Port Mayaca situation where the bloom is at the gates, Port Mayaca, that would be the thing that would prohibit the discharging. But I feel it should be expanded to include the whole lake. But I just want to hear your thoughts on what in the world we'll do in that case.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you propose a, you know, a theoretical thing that isn't always theoretical, right? I mean, you know, I can easily envision a time frame where there would be as you mentioned, a storm bearing down and algae on the lake. And that is a very significant decision. I could also, you know, talk about, you know, kind of the way we're doing business now, and the commitment to kind of continue in that. I mean, we have made decisions in the last few years where we've made those calls. As an example, as recent as February, you know, not directly related to the Caloosahatchee, but you know, when we were, and I'll just highlight that, right? So we're sitting here in February, we're still up above, you know, we're still doing Herbert Hoover Dike inspections, right? I've got my engineer team out there looking at potential seepage, and we've been above our, you know, one of the critical thresholds for a while. And the imperative to get water off the lake at the beginning of February using the new HAB deviation, which took us a year to get in place, right? So, you know, my goal was get the water off the lake, because at that point in time, I was very concerned about getting here. I mean, for a while, we didn't know if we were gonna get below 14 feet. And I was really nervous about that. And you know, we have indicators that when the lake is high or a storm kind of comes by, and you know, that sometimes translates into more algae on the lake in the summer. You know, and so we have anecdotal information, and you know, the scientists debate some of that, and we're looking for understanding better. But that's an example. In February, number one imperative, get water off the lake, right? And the only thing that held back from that at that point in time was, you know, concerns over red tide at the end of the Caloosahatchee, right? So I wanted to get about 2,500 out, and we took a pause. And we took a pause on purpose as we were monitoring kind of the red tide issues on the western side. Fortunately, there was dissipation, and we were able to ramp up relatively quickly. You know, in the, you know, at other times, you know, as an example, as we had discussed, you know, coming out of 2018, you know, kind of in the January, February, March timeline, and specifically, you know, we got significant water right here. There was a concern. We knew we were trying to reduce the lake level that specific year after multiple years of high levels. And so trying to get water off the lake at a time where, you know, there wasn't any algae present, and kind of working that. Sometime in, you know, as we were doing that, not specifically related to algae, but another consideration, right? We did execute releases to the St. Lucie in that springtime, and deliberately so, and as thoughtful as we could, and we did that right up until we had the scientists tell us that the oysters were in their reproductive cycle, right? So we went up, and it was a day by day. It was every single day where we were looking at that, and when that showed that was coming, you know, we pulled back. There's been multiple times in the past few years where, you know, the desire to make releases was there, but the conditions weren't right, and so we held back. And so what I can commit to you is that is part of how we think. And at no time as you're talking about significant algae on the lake or algae at the structure at 308, there is no time when we want to open the gate, just to simplify it. But I can see a scenario, kind of right there, if there is algae and there's a storm and it's there, that's a tough call. And I would suggest, that I would probably execute releases. I mean, it's gotta be decisions-based, it's gotta be risk-based, but I can see that scenario, in play. But, as we go forward, there's, the logic has to be in the EIS and in the documentation and the water control manual that accounts for that type of decision. And we're looking for help as we write that manual, to make sure we get it right. It's not an all or nothing. I mean, there's no way I could say if A, then B 100% of the time. We just don't have that kind of certainty in the system. But we're absolutely committed to working with and applying the logic appropriately, so that we don't. And I know that's a little vague, but that's what we're trying to get after. Yes, sir.
You read in the news and they equate the dam or the dam around Okeechobee is failing, like Katrina. In Katrina, New Orleans, where it failed, the land was 20 feet below sea level. When you go out Lake Okeechobee, Pahokee, which is the lowest level around the lake, is 15.8 feet above sea level. So if you got 17.5 feet in the lake, does that mean that the whole dam is going to fall down and it's going to flood a whole bunch of communities, or is it just going to seep through a 300-foot wall of earth?
Yeah, so when we look at our dam safety analysis,
Yes.
we have zones. And certainly, on the southern and eastern part, there's inundation for 15,000? I think it's about 15,000 people. And so when we're talking about critical dike failure, once the dike starts failing, it goes. And it tends to be able to go quick in that type of scenario. And so there's, 15,000 people at risk for a significant flood event in that zone. Overall, I think it's about 35,000. I think it's about 35,000 when you look at the communities around. And so, while maybe not a 20-foot wall coming at you, you're still talking about flooding people and putting people's lives in danger very specifically. So it's serious business. Fortunately, the $2 billion worth of infrastructure we put into Herbert Hoover Dike it looks great. I mean, when we were here, I'm talking to Jason's team and my engineers doing real critical assessments. A couple of years ago, that would have been a very, very concerning event. But because of the way and because of the construction on the culverts and the cutoff wall that's been put in place, significantly different. And so we weren't as worried. And how does that really translate, right? So that translates into this kind of spike right here. So at this point in time, August, September, October of 2020, right? Because of the way we had seen the dike, specifically around Dorian timeframe, because we were highly concerned that Dorian was going to come straight across Lake Okeechobee. And so, we'd done some analysis, we knew where we were in the construction process, and we had a pretty good assessment on the risk. And so in August, September, October of 2020, made a pretty deliberate decision. And that decision was no releases, despite what was suggested in the lake schedule, and we honestly tried to beat the wet season. We tried to get out of that thing, you know, we saw what was happening. There was a lot of things going on in the Atlantic at that time, but the timing of those storms was kind of coming to an end. And we thought, I personally thought, if we could get to October, you know, somewhere around there, we could get away with it. Like, we could make it. And so that was a lot of discussion with the science community, with the South Florida Water Management District, on really doing an evaluation of that risk. And we felt pretty comfortable at that time. And unfortunately, the scenario played out, and we had an October and a November with just an extreme, you know, 175 and 300% precipitation, more than expected, and it put us into a recovery zone, you know, in the winter and in the spring of this coming year. But those are the types of decisions, number one, that I talk about when I talk about flexibility, right? I'm not talking about wild, you know, change of the plan, forget everything you know, give it all away and just do what you want. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making a decision in August when you're looking at where you are and what's happened in the past. And there was nothing more than we wanted to do than have another year without significant high volume discharges. And so we wanted to do that. It didn't quite work out, but we also didn't, you know, cause critical failure or have excessive flooding or any of that kind of stuff because of the decisions we made. So we're very calculated and very deliberate about how we do that. But I know there's a lot of concern, you know, about flexibility, about the term flexibility. But those are the things that we're kind of talking about when we talk about flexibility, and those are the impacts specifically, you know, when you talk about the Herbert Hoover Dike repairs and some of that flexibility that is gained by that kind of thing. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to be clear that none of us here advocate for increased flood risk in the Glades communities, and that's yet another reason to send more water south all the way down to the water shortage management ban. So could you go back to that slide, Ava? I wanted to ask you, Colonel Kelly, if you are seriously considering as an optimization possibility removing that Zone F so that we can do that. You did it in alternative AA. A lot of us like it, not just on the East Coast, West Coast, Southern Everglades, Florida Bay. Do you think we can do that moving forward?
Considering, yes. Committing, no. Right? So that's what we're working on, right? So I have heard concerns by other stakeholders that ask us very nicely and passionately not to. And so, you know, is it something that we can do? I'm pretty excited about what I saw South Florida Water Management District do, right? They did some sensitivity runs. I think a lot of people, you know what they did. We've had one meeting with them, so we're just kind of cracking the hood and figuring out, you know, what knobs and tweaks they did, you know, to get some of their sensitivity runs. And so we're looking at that. We don't know exactly how that worked, but I think that gives you know, some opportunity out there. And so absolutely considering it. It's something that I've heard loud and clear from multiple stakeholders. And I'll let you know at the beginning of August whether that's a focus area for optimization.
Go ahead.
Hello again. C-44 flowing back into the lake. My brother is right there. I talk a lot, he doesn't talk a lot. He does all the numbers. And it's been very interesting to look at what that provides for our estuary. At the most recent South Florida Water Management District meeting, somehow or another, I got off on that and I misspoke. And I just want to say for the record again that I hope that that continues, not just as it is today, but that continues to be an option for not having to receive the runoff from the C-44 canal when somebody can use it. And if in the future there's a way to clean the water, or to have the agricultural community or built-up community, you know, putting fewer nutrients into the water so that water is cleaner going back into the lake, that would be fantastic. But right now, it's just a matter of water supply, usually. So Todd, would you come up and say something about it? He's so much smarter than I am. My mother likes him better than me too.
But I have so much to say, I don't know where to start. But other than I totally appreciate what you all are doing, and I've seen it because I've been watching for years, and the methods have changed since Jackie and I started kind of looking at the logic of this, because that's what it was. There was no logic to what was being done a couple years ago when there was the algae out there, and it was coming, right at us, and it made no sense. And it was because it wasn't into the logic tree, And so you have a system where it's like, well, no, we don't consider algae, so it doesn't matter if it's on the lake or not, it's coming your way. But to answer Jackie's question about the C-44, yeah, I think that goes into what you were just saying, what you were doing this year. You wanted to get down to 14. You get down to 14, that opens up options up here because now you're lower than us. That's another thing that's kind of weird about here. Out here in Western Martin County, it's 22-something feet. It's high. That water used to go that way to an extent out west. And so it can be more natural where when you have the lake below 14, then you've got the option of when we're sitting in the wet season, we absolutely do not need a drop of water here. You've got the flexibility to go the other direction. And you got the capacity when that storm hits. And I'm telling you something you know much better than I do. But yeah.
If you're that good with numbers, I'm not sure I do.
But yes, thank you for what you're doing. And definitely get the algae into the logic. And yeah, I've been watching. I have my algae website with the satellite imagery. And if there's anything I can do to provide information, which NOAA already has, but to just help in that respect, I'm all here to help.
I have to say, Todd, my little brother, he, years ago, I don't even remember which year it was now, probably 2015, 14, he was the first one that started those comparative images of true color compared to the, whatever it is, the satellite image. And we were very honored when NOAA copied that. And the bottom line is, we are in it here, sir. We are in it. We have dedicated so much of our lives, all of us, to this. It's unbelievable. It's like, it is our life, this Lake Okeechobee situation. So everything you can do to help. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. And just out of complete transparency, right? So there is, I have been asked to take a look at, whether you want to call it backflow or C-44 flow, right? I look at 308 and management of the 44 canal as flexibility in the system, right? That's the way I oversimplify. I know I oversimplify, but that's the way I look at it, right? Because again, as we were in this area in the conservation mode, right? We had the shortest shortest wet season and driest September and another really dry March, right? And so as I was looking at conserving water that year, so we didn't bust. It was scary right about there. But when we were going down to there, water was flowing in. And I think, at rough volumetric calculations, it was probably 6 inches, I guess, somewhere around there maybe on the lake that we were able to kind of hold. And then other times, the past couple weeks, we've been managing the C-44 canal. I've been talking about it, as this kind of spike starts to go up, that is a decision that I'm going to have to make pretty soon. Just with what's going on, just to get real neck down into very specifically time now. So time now, if a good rain event hits in the 44, that area, we will likely have to close off 308, and it's going to go through S80. That's what's happening now, but we have not changed our release guidance or release decision to do that by choice yet. I'm thinking maybe another week. I don't know. These guys will tell me soon enough, and then we'll deliberate on it. But we're really close to doing that transition now. And then we're going to have to anyway, just by gravity, as you put out, once the lake level gets high. So just so you know.
Thank you.
And I don't want to, I always try to tell you what's coming, and to the best of my ability, knowing what I know. But that's that's kind of the next decision that's gonna be affecting this area.
Colonel Kelly,
Yes, sir.
on that subject, what's the time frame on the C-44 reservoir, and sending water there? As we get close to that 14-foot mark, is there any chance that the opening of that reservoir can buy us more time in delaying any water flowing this way with regulating the C-44?
C-44 begins its, I know it's October, but I was trying to think of the word. What are we doing? We're filling it up. We're filling it up in October. And so, yeah, so we're looking at that. I mean,
Built
what I
into
can.
the model.
Yeah,
Todd
so,
offered to help in any way he could if we can get that
Right.
reservoir coming on,
Yeah.
within that next week.
yeah, whatever.
What we're trying to do is buy time
I understand.
to stave off any water coming on.
Yep, understood. And just to be clear on,
Looking at.
yes, sir. And just to be clear on C-44, and sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I get excited sometimes. You know, just to be clear, all of the balanced array alternatives that we looked at, the reason why we looked at the no action alternative for 2025 is that it already is built in the C-44 and the C-43, so we don't have to turn around and create a new schedule again, right, in 2 more years and go through this again. I think it incorporates that, but we've considered that and it's in the modeling. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Stacy Hetherington, Chair of the Martin County Board of County Commissioners. It's good to see you all again. And Colonel Kelly and your team, I just want to express our sincerest thanks for the process that you have set up over the last couple of years. Certainly other speakers have mentioned, it's been transparent, it's been engaging, and while, this is not perfect by any means, and no one stood up here and said, we appreciate the efforts. Of course, 0 discharges to us would be perfect. But when I was sitting there listening to some of the speakers and over the last few minutes and talking to some of the residents over the last few weeks, is one sentiment that I've heard and seen is that there's some form of hope. And what I think has been, historically a hopeless type of situation. So what we see is there's hope with this process, there's hope with what you've been presenting, and I don't think our residents have felt that kind of hope in a number of years. So for that, I certainly express my gratitude. I'm a 4th generation native of here, and I don't plan to leave anytime soon. And we welcome you all too, Colonel Kelly, to relocate. And I would be remiss as if I didn't recognize our team. John Mayle came up and gave our county's our position earlier, but our residents should know and that they have a heck of a team working on their behalf. So there's a couple of them in this room, and I want to mention them because it's really important that, and there's only a few of them in this room: John, Diane, Katie, Kathy, Ruth, Dawn. That's just a small portion of our county team that we've assembled on behalf of our residents, and you have done a heck of a job. So, and again, while this is not perfect, we see hope in the process and we appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'll just pile on, right? So you mentioned it earlier. I mean, so the transparency and all that coordination and communication. First of all, appreciate the compliment. That's, the team has worked extraordinarily hard. Got a fantastic team that has just been cranking and doing a tremendous job. But I do understand, and there's been times when folks like your team or others have gone, hey, wait a second, and pointed to something, and I heard about it. We learned some things, right? And so it just makes us all better. And then the third thing is, the communication and the transparency and the style in which we're doing business. It is really because there is such a level of communication and coordination where we're not yelling at each other, we're talking through it. And that allows me personally and my team to be a little bit more extroverted in our approach, right? There were times, and there are times, when it's really challenging to telegraph thoughts ahead of action to receive feedback. If all you're gonna do is get clubbed in the head, that is not a place you go, and you go ahead and make decisions to the best intention to move out, but it's much better when there's that dialogue. So I totally appreciate, this community, the stakeholders who have borne with us through all this challenge as we keep going, and I do think there's hope. I am personally hopeful. I think the next schedule is better than this one, and I think the next one will even be better. There'll be more infrastructure in the ground and all kinds of things, but just couldn't have done it without that kind of give and take, so thank you very much.
Thanks. Colonel Kelly, thanks. Just on that, I'm glad Commissioner Messon brought that up. C-44 is a project we all been working on, part of SERP, part of the plan moving forward to take care of the 116,000 acre C-44 basin primarily, so that when that canal level starts to get high because of all the local basin runoff there, we can take care of it through the C-44 reservoir and STAs and so forth, and hopefully not backflow into the lake, because backflowing into the lake isn't healthy for the lake either, bringing not only with the water additions to it, but also the nutrients and everything else. Could you go back to that one slide real quick on that you brought up earlier? And my question is on when we started out with the Perdido analysis and looking at that back in April, the kind of the limits on the discharging was brought up by John and others about that 59,000 acre feet at S308. And so that kind of changed when we started looking at the framework, the CC framework, and all the discharges at the end of Part D here. When we look at that decision tree, we're at S80. And so then when we looked at this analysis of the 50-year period record, this 72,000 acre feet or under the CC was basically at S308, I believe. But then this looks like we're looking at the dry and wet season, or particularly the wet in Zone D there at 3,600 CFS out of S80. So I'm getting kind of confused of whether you're talking about when water's going to the estuary or we're sending water east or west. Are we talking about S308 or S80? And as you know, in the framework, we're looking at S80 at zero discharges to the St. Lucie. That's S80 coming into the St. Lucie. S308, if it comes from the lake into S308 but doesn't go through S80, then it may be picked up for water supply in the C44 basin, or may even go back to the lake or wherever, but that's kind of not coming to the estuary. And so it's similar to on the West Coast. They don't want this S77 and S79. They prefer everything measured at S79. We prefer everything measured at S80, and let's talk about it in that way, so that because we all relate both of our estuaries to the recover criteria. And the recover criteria talks about all the inflows from all sources coming in, including the lake releases, at those areas into the estuary. So can you help me out in understanding where we went from the Perdido analysis through this other, going back from S308 to S80 to S80? Is that what
Yeah, so I'll start, and then Jason, you're gonna help me out here. But, so I think from a logic perspective, right, so the West Coast stakeholders absolutely have clearly made the indicator on measuring on an S79 versus S77, right? When we look at the schedule and the logic, the levers of control we have are at S80 and at S77, right? Because the Caloosahatchee doesn't go both ways, right? The St. Lucie does. And so you can input water into the C44 canal that never comes out S80, right? And so that's a little bit of what we were talking about. Sometimes it moves one way, sometimes, and you know all this, right? But, so in the logic, as we look at it from a management perspective, certainly S80 is the control point. Now, in the analysis and in some of the modeling, we kind of tried to refine, what was physically coming off the lake specifically, when we had to look specifically at how this sort of plan translates directly to water off the lake, and fine tune it that way. At some points we had to look at that in the data sets to see, you know, how much came off the lake versus how much was eaten in the C-44 versus all that. And sometimes you gotta pick it apart, so that you could see the data truly. But when we get to the logic part, you know, S80 is the control point for us. And we're more
Sir, I
technical
don't
than
think
that.
you really need me.
All right.
No, you actually answered it perfectly, which is obviously the measurement point is S80, and that's the way it's gonna stay. But the figure that you held up are the lake regulatory releases, right? So those could be called S308 flows, if you wanna think of them that way. But really, we're just looking, that figure you held up is just the lake. So what he said is exactly right. So don't misconstrue if you see something as reported at 308. We're not gonna change the measurement point for how we operate, okay? It's just slicing and dicing the data. You may look at it at 308, and as he said, since it flows in both directions, you do want to sometimes see what's happening there. That doesn't mean we're gonna, you know, operate based off of that. So we're looking at the flows everywhere in the system all the time, obviously, anyway. But when it comes time to the up twos, they're gonna be off of S80 over here. And then as far as, you know, the S77 and S79, we're committed to looking at that, right? So we're gonna look at,
We're considering.
yeah.
Not committing yet.
We're considering.
Yes.
See, you really don't need me.
I know.
So that's what we're gonna be. We're gonna be evaluating that to look at whether measurement at 79, reporting at 79, and measuring at 77, right? So these are all things that we're gonna explore to try to help the Caloosahatchee folks get truth in advertising, as they
Appreciate
call
that
it.
clarification. And just on the up fact of the up to figure CFS, which has been in recent plans, that's hopefully that maintaining that flexibility in your operations is gonna remain in there, because the up to has been used a lot of times by yourselves when you get down to that management level and say, well, we could send up to 1,000 CFS, but we don't have to. We could send less than that and discharge less than that. So having that kind of criteria in there is better than just saying, it's gonna be 1,000 CFS, period.
Yeah.
And that's mandated, you know, so
Right.
the up to gives you that kind of flexibility.
Every time this comes up, I say this, so I know you've heard it, but just for the record, when we talk about metering discharges based on recover, I always like to remind the group that recover for us is measured really at the Roosevelt Bridge, because that's where our estuary begins and collects from North and South Florida, all the other tributaries.
C-23 and C-24?
Yes.
All those count.
Hi, I'm Gil Smart. I'm Policy Director for Friends of the Everglades, founded in 1969 by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. But I came here in December 2015, brought my family down from Pennsylvania to work as a journalist. We moved to Paradise, and about 5-6 months later, we had the lost summer of 2016 with green algae lapping up on our shores. Businesses were closed, health warnings, beaches were closed, and I thought, this is paradise. But at the time, even now still, there was a term bandied about in the newsroom and out in the community, shared adversity, and people spoke it very cynically. The idea being that there was this system in place that was supposed to share the adversity, yet somehow we always wound up getting all of it, us and the Caloosahatchee. And certain other interests didn't share any adversity, never seemed to get any adversity whatsoever. But now, with the LOSOM process, to steal Commissioner Hetherington's term, there is hope. There is hope that there, you know, the adversity will maybe be shared, perhaps for the first time. But I know that you are hearing from other stakeholders elsewhere who don't want to share any of that adversity. I watched some of the proceedings from Palm Beach County this morning, and I heard several other stakeholders arguing why they should not have to accept any adversity. And here's what's going to happen if we get any adversity. And I just would like to say that this community understands, I think, you know, we're advocating for zero discharges, but I think many among us understand that there probably will be discharges. You know, it's just a matter of how much adversity are we going to have to accept this time around. But what we hope is that this process will, in fact, produce shared adversity, and that we don't have to sit around and take all of it, you know, ourselves for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
I'd just like to thank a couple people, as well as the Corps. I didn't make this too public, but my grandfather served on the governing board of South Florida Water Management District in the 70s. And that was something that I haven't told too many people of. I didn't advertise it when I was running for city commissioner. I spoke a lot about how I wanted to run to get a platform. I wanted this podium to advocate for our water. But I'm proud of that now, and I'll say that, because this type of open dialogue wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. But it's changed, and it's changed because of the actions over the past few years of the Army Corps of Engineers under your leadership, Colonel Kelly. The South Florida Water Management District has changed because of their new governing board. So thank you to our local governing board member, Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch. And I'm very appreciative that this process was spawned in Congress. And so thank you, Congressman Mast, for getting it started, getting the ball rolling. This needed to happen. It needs to happen every 10 years, you know, or even sooner. That the reevaluation of what infrastructure we have needs to be constant. And that's where you need that flexibility. And as you can see here, the entire community cares deeply about how this affects us. So thank you for listening and coming out and having this open dialogue.
Make Ben talk.
Thank you.
Make Ben talk. Ben's another superstar.
Ben is our City of Stewart's river advocate. I know.
I've been actually, wow, thank you. Wasn't expecting that. Actually, I just wanted to give everybody else the chance to talk. I get too many chances, I think, when they put me on TV, when there's green slime. I'm that guy that's like, hey, you know, we don't like this. But Colonel Kelly, this is for you. I've told you before, I come from a military family. I have two uncles who are retired colonels. I have all the respect in the world for your civilian staff as well as your military staff. I honestly don't think that enough people really understand what you all did here. I'm a little bit of a history geek myself. Maybe I'll write something one day. But I think courage comes in a lot of forms, and especially among men, you know, in service. From what I've seen, I've seen different variants of it in my grandfather, both of them in my uncles, and my father. And when I look at your team, you know, a diverse staff, and I see what they've done here in the last 2 years, a lot of people think, you know, that it was a transparent process. That, yeah, absolutely, it was all those things. But it took really you, the rest of your leadership, courage to look at the rest of the staff in conviction to go with a process that allowed for not just transparency, but I like the analogy of you gave everybody the cake that they were looking for in the modeling process. We all got to see our perfect scenarios or near perfect scenarios. Then you had to take it away. And man, if that ain't the hardest thing to do in the United States of America, I don't know what is. To show everybody a perfect cake and then have to take some of it away. But this community hasn't had the luxury of fear and anxiety. I heard that this morning in the Palm Beach meeting, that they were concerned that they had anxiety. And I'm like, we don't even have that luxury here because this community has suffered. They've experienced injury. They don't know anything but that, unfortunately. And the last 2 years gave them such a relief. I think Lake Ecologists would say the same thing, getting that lake down to 11 feet at least one time probably helped a little bit to provide some relief. What we're hoping ultimately that comes from this process is that we can change, not just, you've already changed the culture in the Army Corps, not just you individually, but your team has done that. And I've gotten to work with more than just those of you who are here. I've had the pleasure, and I think John Mayle said it better than anyone could, the ability to work with your staff during this process kind of gave me renewed hope. My first experience professionally, I was 19 years old, working in a senator's office in Washington, D.C. on foreign policy issues in the middle of a war. Yeah, it was a heck of a, you know, picking up the phone and it's 4-star General Abizade. Oh my God, you know, it was overwhelming at a young age, but whoa, was it educational? And this process has been equally educational for me as an individual to learn what allows all of us to to put forward our best efforts, to come together to make a plan that will hopefully be better. Unfortunately, Laura's 08 set kind of a low bar, so it was, in my opinion, pretty easy to do a little bit better than it. And really all the plans, even BB in some respects improved over that. But your commitment to really look at this with kind of a level-headed approach, but also at the same time with the inclusiveness to keep continuously listening, that's everything. That was everything to these folks who've been hurting for so long. I've only been down here in South Florida for a few years, so I haven't put enough time in for me individually to say that I've suffered enough. All I can do is, just like you, is try to fight for their best interests, and do the best job that I can. But thank you all for coming here, for doing this, for having this process. Even 2.5 years into LOSOM, here you are again, still listening. So thank you very much. That's all I can say. And I look forward to working with each of you a little bit further and for the next year. Thank you.
Colonel Kelly, I wanted to say, back 23 years ago, 1998, we were here, and they started discharges that year in January, and we peaked out at about 7,000 CFS coming out of S80, and it just tapered off this time of year during that year, and it was devastating to the estuary. And it was the first time ever then we got together as a community, and not just us environmental folks, but it was the realtors, the board of realtors, the Chamber of Commerce, all the business community got together and said, this is terrible. We've got to do something. And we formed the Rivers Coalition. And we were a few organizations strong at that time, and we said, we got to fight for clean water in this estuary because we know how important it is. And you've heard today, of course, many people during this time tell you that. So just this past Thursday at our meeting, we passed a kind of a motion to get your letter to you with these points, particularly about how to optimize CC so it's better for us. And I know we delivered it, but we represent 105 organizations now with over 400,000 people. So serving as president this year, I appreciate the opportunity to just give you this letter in person too.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks again for coming. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if you have any closing comments?
Yeah, sir. So I'd just like to say thanks again, right? So, number one, there is a tremendously dedicated team that I have the honor of working with, and being in the chair, right? So they're doing all the work. I get to come out and talk about things. But at the end of the day, I think, and I really appreciate the feedback. At the end of the day, as we go through this process, and as we've done so far, isn't anybody on the planet that says my team doesn't care, right? We're committed 100% all in to do the very best we can. And we're committed to keep doing that. So we will continue to do that. We got some tough choices coming up. We're talking through a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different perspectives, and we're listening. And again, I'll be very, very clear at the beginning of August with, what we're going with, how we're specifically going to focus on any optimizations, and then how we're keeping the band together, the team, the stakeholder group together to help us continue through the next year plus so we can get at the end of 2022, because I am committed and trying as best as possible. As soon as the Herbert Hoover Dike is repaired, we need a new schedule. We just need a new schedule. And it's gonna be better than the last one. I'm confident of that. And so we're working through that. And so we'll do the best we can to continue that frame, and just really appreciate you've set the tone where that communication is acceptable and that coordination is acceptable. In the past, what I've noticed most is as we deliberate about decisions, more and more folks are willing to come out and say what they think and put their finger on it and say, I recommend, right? A lot of times when things get hard, people don't put their name on a recommendation. You know, they just kind of stay quiet, and they say, well, that's your decision, good luck with that, right? But at least in the science calls, in the interagency calls, right, people are starting to say, hey, listen, here's what we think you ought to do. We know it's your decision, but here's what we think you ought to do. And that gives us a ton of room to make better decisions. And so I just really want to say I appreciate the opportunity to come and have an informal dialogue and answer questions and just kind of talk. So thanks a ton. Appreciate it.